Hi guys, my name is Katie Marino and I am the founder of organizedadvisor.com, and I am so excited to show you a method that I really like to use with my students called the puzzle pieces. And it's kind of like a layout generator. It doesn't technically create any sort of layout for you, but it lets students really start to see how they can create modular layouts by putting a bunch of pieces together. And it lets them make sure that they have like thicker rails of white space in between modules, as well as tighter white space within modules to keep those grouped together. And then also it shows how to take a spread from good but not great all the way through really amazing, robust content, theme elements, design elements incorporated, colors, all of that, all in this one show. So in your downloads, there is the InDesign file that you're welcome to use. But if you're not an InDesign school, no worries. The PDF is there too that you can print out and use right out the gate. Or you can actually just recreate this in your design software, print that out. It's in your correctly sized book, and you can actually create your own modules and use the same concept for your own software. So just to let you know, like this is InDesign, but don't worry that you can't use it if you don't have InDesign. Not at all. It's absolutely not the case. So let me make myself a little smaller so you can see here. So in the file, there are some instructions here. So in case you forget, it's all there, or if your students are using it, there's also a couple of definitions and just how this is set up. And I'm going to start by introducing you to what I call the base grid. And so that's what we're looking at right here. And so this is a 3-row by 6-column across the whole spread grid, and this isn't actually used. This is just to show you where things came from. And so this is keeping thicker margins around the outside, a bigger margin on the bottom for your folio. So if you were doing this for your own book and your folios are at the top, you'd want to adjust that. Like you'd want more space there. If your folios were along the side, again, you'd want to adjust that. So this is just a very traditional like folios on the bottom kind of layout, and it's using 3 by 3 on each page and then 6 all the way across as the base grid. It'll make more sense in a second where that base grid comes from, but just to show you, this is where things start. But you can make your base grid whatever you want. This is another example. A lot of schools, they would like a lot more flexibility with their puzzle piece sizes, and so they use a totally different size grid. It's totally up to you, whatever you are comfortable with. Maybe this makes your smallest module too big because your smallest module would be like a 1 by 1 size square. And here, maybe you have a module that's like 9 of these. And so it gives you more flexibility if you use a different size grid. So up to you, whatever you decide. I would just say that in order for this to like breed consistency with your staff using it as a puzzle, pick a grid and use that throughout the whole book. You can't have different kids using different grids. You kind of as a staff need to decide we're using this grid or we're using that one. So for the example though, I'm going to be using this one. And so then you take that base grid and you start to create puzzle pieces from it. And so you're going to create blocks or pieces in every size option that is available within that base grid. Now, if you're using this one, you might want to make some rules, like no puzzle pieces can be smaller than at least 3 by 3, but you could do 3 by 4, 3 by 5, 3 by 6. You don't want anything like, I don't know, like anything too small like this, because you're not going to have a module that's like this tiny, right? So as you can see here, I have all my 1 by 1, 1 by 2, 1 by 3s, and it's just using that base grid. So like we said, you can envision it here. There's 1 block here, there's 2 blocks here, and all 3 taken up here. 2 by 1, 2 by 2, blah, blah, you get it. And we did all the different possible combinations of all the base grids. And like I said, if you're using this in your own design software, you can absolutely recreate this. And it gives you the tools to do so. But also you can just print out the PDF because again, this is conceptual. And so unless you're actually using these as module placeholders, which you can in like the second phase, don't waste your time recreating the wheel. They're already off here. So I would just use the PDF for this part. So as you can see, I'm going to keep scrolling. There's a bunch of puzzle pieces. There are 29 pages, 29 spreads of puzzle pieces. And like, you're not going to use them all, but you want your students to have them all to be able to build spreads from. And so what you're going to do is you're going to print all those out, and you can print multiple copies and have them work in small groups, or you can laminate them and have them different colors. Like you can do lots of different things with it, but you're basically going to print them. And if you can, do it at full size and then they will place them onto their layouts and arrange them in a way that creates a modular layout using all the different size puzzle pieces. And so what they do, once they do that, you start to build templates. And so these are like not at all complete templates, but they're something that gets the students to start to see that you take these shapes, put them together into a layout. So you can see that they use a 1x3. This is a 2x3, a 2x2, and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5x1 going all the way across. But the student next to this one could have very well done the one that goes all the way across here, and it'd still be a good layout. Basically, you want them to fill up the entire space using the different puzzle pieces that are available. And so I have a bunch of different examples in here. That one, that one, this one. And you can see they're varied. So we have some that have really giant sections. Like this is a really good spot for a dominant photo. We have some that have a lot of spots for little tiny content. Maybe you have a varsity football page, it's going to lend itself to bigger sections. So maybe this one's great for varsity football. But then you have a group of clubs that you need to cover kind of all together. This is going to be really great for that. You have maybe a more active club in the bigger section or a bigger club. Then you have some smaller features of smaller clubs that maybe only did one or two things throughout the year, but there's still space for it. But on this layout, you can get a lot more content, not more content, but more individual pieces of different types of content than you can with one that only has 4 sections, right? So then your staff decides, okay, these are the 3 or 4 or 5, probably less is better, maybe 4 templates that we're going to use. But remember, those 4 templates actually turn into quite a bit more templates, because out of this one, say you like this one, say you're going to have some modules that are like really tall and skinny timelines. You can flip this layout, and so this left column will actually be on the right side. You can also flip it horizontally and vertically, so this blocks here will actually be on top, and then you can do both, and so that actually becomes 4 separate layouts. So those 4 templates actually become 16 total, if my math is correct. But you aren't just stuck on using all of your layouts having the same things in the exact same spot, but you are using the same base, so it has that consistent feel. You have a lot of those same shaped modules throughout the book. So you have a bunch, and these are what your kids are going to create. You can do this virtually. You can do this, not virtually, digitally, like on the computer, if you want them to be on the computer practicing the software. But this is something that I think is really more hands-on and tactile. Like I think it's better to have the kids like with them cut out and have them piecing them around, working together to kind of create like what types of layouts they want to as a group, or small groups, or individuals, whatever you want to do. Okay, so there's a bunch of examples in there. All right, so then we're going to take those and we're going to create sample layouts. Now, this is like before you start designing your book. This is when you're in that testing phase. You're trying to flesh out your theme. You're trying to build your style guide. You're trying to decide what fonts and design elements you want to use. You're trying to look at different colors together. But it's not helpful. It's not as helpful, I think, to look at blocks of color on a blank spread. Like you can't see how it's actually going to be applied to the content until you put it in some layouts. And so you want to use like sample photos, dummy text, but you want to use real similar modules to what you would as real content, so you can start to see it come to life. Otherwise, it just looks like bubbles or blocks on a page, and you can't really see how those colors look applied. And then you apply it, and it doesn't look anything like you thought, and you're back at square one. So this is part of that testing phase. Once you start to flesh it out and develop what those layouts are going to look like, then you can make some decisions, and you can say these are our modules that we're going to actually use. So let's walk through it. So this is the template we chose. It has a big long block at the top. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across and 1 tall. This is a 1x1. This is a 2x3, and then this is a 3x1, 2, 3, 4. 3x4. I kind of have to envision it as I count it, because I don't know right off the bat how big that is, but remember that base grid is what this is all based off of. Okay, so here's the layout that was created from that base template. You can see this long and skinny area right here, this 1x1 here, this is that 2x2, and the 2x4. And you can see that the boxes in the gray are just meant to show you that base grid. This is actually the layout without uh, mm, that's not supposed to be there, without the gray boxes, so you can see that this is how it would actually come together printed in the yearbook. This is a beautiful spread. I think it does a really good job of telling whatever story this is. These are all dummy pictures, so really there is no story. But you can see that this 2 by 2 space isn't just one picture, one caption. This is like a mini layout within a spread. And so in this, you can do whatever you want. And within the module itself, you need internal spacing that's consistent, but it should be tighter than the amount of space you have in between these puzzle pieces or modules. And so you can see the spacing you have here is really, really tight, and visually it groups these elements together. So maybe these were both pictures of one event, but it's two different perspectives. But this, because this is a lot thicker, I think this is like 3 picas or 4, it's visually separated from that dominant area. It's also visually separated from this timeline up here because it's intentionally a lot thicker of a space. We call those rails of white space. Same thing over here. This is a little bit harder to see because it's a timeline and there's a lot of white space, but you can see here where it still had those gray boxes, like there's these rails of white space all throughout. And then, okay, so that tall and skinny or long and skinny one turned into a timeline. This 1 by 1, I will say there's not much you can do with 1 by 1s in terms of like a lot of detail because they are so small. So it's more so something you want to like really highlight or draw attention to. But for this, we just did a caption and a picture, and it accomplished what it needed to. Then in your biggest section is typically where you're going to want to put your dominant. I wouldn't say typically, it is where you're going to want to put your dominant photo, but it doesn't necessarily have to just be your dominant photo and a caption, right? Like you want to have a story, you want to have additional content there, you want to have something that adds interest and takes the reader through a journey of whatever it is you're trying to cover. And so even though this super does go outside of the rail of white space a little bit, it's okay. It's one of those like know the rules and then break the rules kind of moments because you're not distracted by it. It's not just things thrown haphazardly around the page, and it's the only one. And so it kind of makes sense, especially because the font's a little messy. It looks like it was kind of just scribbled on the page like that, and it makes sense that maybe you color outside the lines. Like maybe your theme is something related to coloring outside the lines, and it makes sense. Okay, so looking at this spread, it doesn't look bad. I think it's beautiful. A kid would turn this in, I would be like, great, this is perfect. Everything is aligned, everything is balanced, everything is even. You have a dominant, you have 5 to 7 photos, you have lots of kids on the page, you have maybe varied ages and grade levels, you have all the ethnicities, you even have secondary coverage or a module or whatever we decide to call that as a timeline. You have detail, you have quotes, you have a really long story. Good job, A plus, right? Like it doesn't look bad. And this process generated the spot to be able to tell this story and this spread. And so a staff member, especially a new staff member, didn't just open their computer to a blank screen and be like, you have football, good luck. Like that is so intimidating and scary, especially if you've never done graphic design before, you're new to the software, you don't know how to go and interview students, you don't even know who's in these pictures, you don't know the coaches, you're maybe even new to the school. Like there's so many things that are so scary, I think, when you first join Yearbook that sitting down to an empty spread is just so scary. And so you can obviously have like your editors and your experienced staff members help, but sometimes you have a staff of all new staff members, or that's junior high, it's the first time they've ever been on Yearbook, or they just start trying it and they have no idea what they're doing, and it's helpful to give them a space to design instead of a whole big blank page. And so maybe you start with just this one module that they have to design, and you tell them, here's our colors that we're going for, here's our fonts, here's our content that's related to our theme, here's some ideas to get you started, here's how you go find someone's schedule, and you walk them through that whole process, and they only have to worry about this one puzzle piece instead of the whole spread. And then they get through that, and then they do part 2, or maybe you start them here because it's just a picture and a caption, and then you like break that down or scaffold it for them instead of just saying, here's your final deadline. We have to break it down, especially for our newbies. So again, it's a good spread. It works. It's beautiful. I think it looks really good. It's really balanced. Obviously, the content would be better because it would all match, but it's not bad, right? Okay, we agree? Cool. Now, moving on, let's improve it a little bit. So this would be what I would say is like the new and improved version of that same spread. And so you can see, let's look at those sections. We have the really long and skinny one here. We have the 1 by 1 here. We have that 2 by 2, and we have the really large 2 by 4. I keep miscounting that one. And you can see comparing this one and this one, this looks a lot more full. It looks a lot more robust. It looks like it was designed with intention. It looks like it has a lot more theme elements and design elements and color and fun. It also has a lot more kids in the book. It has a lot more things to look at and interesting things to explore. And so while the last layout was good and it accomplished everything it needed to, and it was enough, it wasn't as good as it could be. And so what we want to do is we want to push our students. And like I said, if your newbies just accomplish that first level, cool. Like that's good. Like that's a success. We celebrate that. But if you're looking to get to that next level, or if you want to take some spreads and push them to be a little bit more robust in terms of color or theme or intentionality, like this is where you go with it. And so you look at each individual puzzle piece or module instead of how can I make this spread better. I mean, looking at this, I'd be like, I don't know. It looks good. So let's break it down. Let's look at each individual section. So the tall and skinny one. This one had 4 kids in it. It was a day in the life, and it had different times of the day that kids do things. Presumably, it all wouldn't be the same person, right? And so now let's design the. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let's design the section as if it's its own spread. And so things are going to be a little bit different. Like if you've learned the basics of yearbook layout design and that you have an eye line and you have an axis and a dominant photo, like you're not going to have all of those elements within each puzzle piece, but you will have a lot of them. And then when it all comes together, you'll have everything. And so here, let's design this section as if it's its own spread. Let's give it a headline. Let's use our font treatments. Let's use our colors. Let's add design elements like this big question mark here to add verbal and visual connection to what it's actually asking. And so then when you put it all together, you're like, oh, this is cohesive. It works. Also, don't be afraid to add little mini stories. If you need to explain further about what you're doing, what you're asking, if there's some sort of controversial topic that you're asking about, explain what was happening at the time or what the two opinions, where they came from, or what changed that let people have opinions about something. Like, give context to whatever the module is about. Then, let me go back. The 4 people that were in there, I mean, it was spaced out, it was even, it was aligned, it was good round white space, everything had room to breathe. It's not bad, but this one has 8 kids in it. It has double the amount of students in that space, and you could easily go back and add like the little timestamps if you want to make it a timeline. You could add a line behind here that like made it literally a line that's over time, if you wanted to add that type of content. But let's get more kids in the book anytime we can. And then on those pictures, well, these are horribly pixelated. Let me see if I can increase them. No, it doesn't look like I can. These are really old pictures that I'm not sure I still have the links for. So they're just examples. Do as I say, not as I do. Just kidding. I'll go find them. But anyway, you can see it's a cutout. So it's a headshot that's cut out and then put on a colorful background, and then a box of the same size, but without a picture in it, but just the stroke, the outline of it, and then tilted a little bit. And so they're all kind of tilted and shifty all over the place, but they're just subtly crooked, so much so that when you zoom out, it just matches and it looks cohesive. Then you have room for their quote, you have room for their name. A lot of times I see students do their quote and then the name is just in the exact same font or it has a dash. Put them on their own line. Put the first name and then the last name so you can be consistent. Some people have really long names, really short names, but everybody has a first and a last. So break that up. Put the grade level there instead of putting it in like sophomore, like writing it out. But make it visually different than the actual quote if it's not part of a paragraph. If it's in a story, then like have it be written out in the same way. And I think that looks really great. Then in this 1 by 1, which, like I said, is really hard to make um, interesting content because it's so small. We did a special feature for this football player. And obviously, this is like a great picture. He's like catching the football midair, jumping up, and looking at the camera. Like, obviously, it's not candid. So we would probably either have to pose that one if we were like featuring him for some particular reason, or we would use a different shot. But someone catching a football or running, like that would be still really good. And so the colors, I just used my organized advisor colors. And so the navy blue and the yellow, just put the background instead of it being plain white. Let's throw some color on there. And then these little dashed lines are what we decided to be our design element. And so we threw them there. It also kind of goes along with these being crooked and slanted, like looking for ways to incorporate other things that are crooked or slanted is usually an afterthought. But when you're at this stage, you can really take the time to think through, okay, what am I going to add here? And then okay, in this section, we have the 2x2. And so this has, instead of just those two pictures from before, we added two more pictures. So we have four total now. But also, we didn't just add the pictures into a box, we added one of them to be a pull quote. And so it, again, has that yellow background and incorporated it. So we have to balance on left and right. And then also, it incorporates another design element. Maybe throughout the book, we have something about what we're saying, what you said, who said that, or something where we emphasize quotes, and then it makes sense. It's theme related, but we're still keeping internal spacing where these are really tight and consistent. And so it visually groups them together and keeps it separate from that tall, skinny one or long, skinny one and the dominant here. And then because we have these all together, maybe they do need to be somewhat related. So they're either from a similar event or a similar group or some sort of similar topic. Maybe it's this is a summer spread and this is all about people's like out of town vacations, then they have some sort of link. And so because they're all linked together, you can do a group caption. So you just put one headline for them instead of, four, and then you can put directives, I call them directives, to tell people what caption is for what photo. So the top left photo, and then top right photo, bottom left photo, bottom right, but it's all in one section. So you don't have to have like four separate text boxes and you have it all taken care of right there. Okay, so then we have our dominant section. And so we still have our big dominant photo. It's almost the exact same as before. It might be cropped slightly differently. And we have our room for a story. But instead of like I think it was three columns of text, like students don't want to read that. Students don't want to write that. And let's not waste our time, especially if it's not something that's worth storytelling about. If your school goes to state and you win state, obviously write a story about that. If you have a kid who's in the Olympics, obviously write a story about that. There are story worthy reasons to put stories in yearbooks. But typically, if you can find an alternative way to tell that story, it's not only going to be easier to write, students are more likely to read it, and you can probably get more kids in the book as well. So if you have this amount of space, like look at other ways you can tell that story instead of a big wall of text, because I guarantee you no one's going to read it. And maybe they will in like 50 years, but it's probably not going to be that interesting that it's worth reading, just to be honest, unless there is a reason. So instead of that big long wall of text, we did another colorful box. So we did blue this time to balance it so it's not all yellow. Then we threw the slanted lines here onto in between the photo and that box to kind of just bring them together. And then we added, instead of one big long story, we added quotes from 6 students. And so you got 6 different perspectives in the book. Students are telling their own story instead of you having to come up with quotes and transitions and quotes and transitions. They just tell their own story in their quote. And then we were able to incorporate more of that color and different fonts that match our theme in these sections. And it also just breaks it up. This is a lot easier to digest than a big long wall of text, even though the amount of content is similar. This is maybe a little bit less, but again, the other one is fluff. It's not actually good content. And then our headline, instead of, it's almost the exact same design in terms of like coming over that rail of white space, but it also is layered. So again, if you have different design elements at play, and then this block is layered also, like over the or behind the text, kind of like a highlight. You can use all of them, like use multiple design elements. I think a lot of times students are like, okay, what's our design element? And they pick one. But really, I mean, if you're looking at this spread, we have several design elements going on. So not only do we have the different font treatments, or we have like the handwritten, we have slanted things. So not just slanted photos, but also slanted hash marks, I guess they're called. And we have slanted text here. We also have blocks of color and with quotes. We have the first name, last name in all caps and in a different color and stacked if you can. We also have blocks of captions instead of all individuals, which isn't really a design element, but it kind of. Um, and they all work together, but you're not just picking like circles. Like you're picking like aesthetics more so than just one design element. Um, okay. Oh, and then the caption for here, we just put it on the photo because there really wasn't anywhere else to put it. I think sometimes people hesitate to put captions on photos. I don't think it should be on every photo, but especially your dominant, typically it's okay to do that. All right. Oh, okay. So moving on. Now we're going to look at a different version of this same template. So going back to this is the template we decided on. We're going to look at the exact same version, but with totally different content to see how it can evolve and be used multiple times throughout the book without looking like the exact same. So here is, again, the exact same template. We have this long skinny section, a 1x1, a 2x2. I feel like it's like, no, a 2x2, and then a 3x2 in this, on this layout, but it's totally different. I mean, it's a completely different layout, completely different content, completely different vibe, but still consistent. And so this is a really good example to show students like you're picking a template, but you're not stuck to anything. You can interpret this however you want to, as long as you stick within our general aesthetic and you use our design elements. How you want to do that is up to you. And so instead of that timeline, we just did a block of photos. We have three captions here, we have two captions here. We also have a caption here that goes with this photo, even though it has a full quote. You could probably get rid of that if this quote was detailed enough and explained what was happening in the photo, but just in case it's not, we have the space for it. Then instead of that little group of photos, because we already have that here, we turned this into like a little mini story area. So these are all grouped together with another block of color. We also did that highlight kind of element like we did on the last page. We have the big hash marks slanted. And then instead of the dominant photo being where we have our story, we kind of broke it up into two mini stories. So here we have one that's like your section about these basketball boys. And then here you have a long extended quote, but it's also like a mini story because it's not just a one-liner. It's like someone that's telling their own story. But then also we're introducing a whole new design element. This box here, maybe that's something that you've done before on the cover or on your dividers, and you are highlighting certain people. Maybe something related to your theme is about a spotlight or something being called out. And so, or like we talked about, what do you say, or what we say, or what's our quotes. So it makes sense we have our quote box, but maybe we also like call out parts of a group, and we can do that through this. But this wouldn't necessarily be on every single page, but it works really well here because we're doing it through this like extended quote mini story sort of thing. So looking at this, let me make it smaller so you can just visually kind of see. Looking at this and looking at this, they're two sides of the same coin. You can see them in the yearbook, even if they were right next to each other in the yearbook. Someone that isn't in yearbook wouldn't notice these are the exact same base template. And so this is where we want our students to be able to have the creative freedom to create spreads that showcase the content they want in the way they want, but within guardrails. So I kind of say it's like you can go anywhere you want on a boat, but you're still on a boat in the water. Like you can't just get off the boat whenever you want. You still have to stay within the boat, but you can go wherever you want while you're on it. And so that is how to use this generator. But what I can say is that what I've seen to be the most helpful and most successful is staffs will sit together and create these example spreads. Use totally fake photos, don't use all dummy text, use pictures from last year, whatever. It doesn't matter. They don't even have to be on the same topic. Just create the designs, start to see how it comes to life. Look at your colors, look at your fonts, decide on your overall design aesthetic, and then create your own theme related puzzle pieces. And so, just in the same way that we cut out these and we created these templates, now go and cut these out. So, you're going to cut out this one because it was still good. And you have a timeline version of this long, skinny module. Then you're going to cut out this one and you're going to have a quotes and headshots version of this long, skinny module. Then you're going to have a portrait block version of this long, skinny module, right? Then you're going to go cut out the one by one and be like, okay, this is just a simple portrait and caption. Then you're going to have this version of the one by one, the special feature. Then you're going to have a quote version. Okay. Then the two, you get where I'm going. The 2x2, you're going to have just plain simple photos. Then you're going to have a block of photos with a quote. And then you're going to have a mini story. And so what happens is once you flip your layout around, or maybe another layout has a long, skinny version, even if it's not the same base template, you have those examples to then go again to be able to piece together your puzzle pieces, but with content you actually already have created. And so even though their specific content, their people, their quotes, their pictures are going to be different, it's still going to be a similar timeline. It's still going to be a similar type of aesthetic. And so I've seen students like print out all these puzzle pieces and then hole punch them and like put them on a clothespin, like on their bulletin board. So when they start designing a new spread, they get them all out and they start rearranging them, and they visually start to see their spread come to life. And then they build it, and they actually, in InDesign, you can drop them from the libraries, and so you can actually like save them as blocks. I think you can do that in other software too, but it's just, you might have to do it a little bit differently, or copy and paste it from like a sample document or something. But you can really start to see spreads come to life before you ever even touch a computer, because you've already spent the time in the beginning of the year really nailing down what that design is going to look like. And it evolves. You can always create new things as you go, and you can always create new modules, print them out, and throw them on the bulletin board too. There's lots of different ways that you can use this, but mostly I just like that it's a really good tool for getting kids to understand how to take a spread from good but could be better to really, really great, because they break it down and they think about it one module at a time, instead of looking at a big blank spread and being scared of it. So hope that was helpful. If you have any questions at all, I am available at Katie, Katie at organizedadvisor.com. You can also just reach me on the website. It's organizedadvisor with an ER.com, and there's a contact form, goes straight to my inbox, and I'm happy to help you. So if you need anything at all, please reach out, and if not, I will see you around. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.